Kintsugi Heroes acknowledges funding and was made possible with support from the Community Broadcasting Foundation. Find out more at cbf.org.au. Welcome back to Kintsugi Heroes, helping people tell the stories they need to share so you can find the stories that you need to hear. This week, John Millam is joined by Gina McClement. Growing up with undiagnosed ADHD, Gina faced personal and emotional challenges in a high-conflict home. It wasn't until her early 40s that Gina received her diagnosis, which helped her better understand her past struggles. Gina had to navigate a demanding career and motherhood, leading to burnout and a deep dive into self-discovery through over 25 years of therapy. As a qualified psychotherapist, Gina's insights on healing, the importance of supportive relationships, and how facing and accepting fears can transform lives is incredibly valuable. Enjoy this one with Gina McClement.
So, listeners, welcome to another episode of Kintsugi Heroes, stories that matter. And today we're really in that place because we are very, very lucky. And I'm very excited to talk to my friend Gina McClement. So, Gina, you are a mind health practitioner and trained counsellor. You've got qualifications in psychotherapy and all sorts of wonderful sort of helping professions. You're certified up to your nostrils. Without me going through the long list, I will ask you for the listeners. Gina, tell us who you are, right, and how you see all your accomplishments.
Yeah. Oh, look, my goal in life is to have a wildly adventurous life, and so I definitely feel like I'm fulfilling that with
Well, you're
everything that
here
I
with me. That's another adventure, right? I appreciate the courage you've
absolutely.
shown in putting, your reputation in my hands. I'll do my best.
Absolutely. But yeah, who am I? I'm at, these days, like my statement around that is I'm really comfortable. I'm a person who's really comfortable in their own shoes, and it is on the front of my website. So, but that actually comes from my personal story. And that's probably actually the thing that I'm most proud of.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a fair few accolades behind me. Some of them are on the wall, but education was essential in our family. It wasn't a choice. It was a mandatory requirement to not only do it, but to do well. So hence that conditioning I'm grateful for actually. But yeah, it didn't start off as a choice, I don't think. But today I run my own private practice, Living in Bloom. I'm a psychotherapist, a counselor, and a neurodiversity expert. My greatest joy is working with people with ADHD, diagnosed, undiagnosed, basically anyone from the age of 17 up. And I'm a psychotherapist first. And so what that means is I spend a lot of time with people in the attachment space, from the work of John Bowlby, and in the work of the unconscious. So, psychotherapy is really based on, I love the work of Bruce Perry. There's so many we can name, but in terms of, when we look at 0 to 5, 0 to 10, and the experiences of the human brain and how influential it is in organizing itself in those years, and how much that then gets projected onto the trajectory that we walk in life, and that we are very much unconscious to that until we make it conscious and we choose to go on whatever healing journey that is. So that's who I am today. God, I've been a ex-marketing director, sports marketing, company director. Like I said, it's been an adventurous journey, but that's me now.
That's a great way of describing it. I'm fascinated by the idea that we are so influenced by our parents and they shape stuff, and some of it, like you're grateful for, the structure that gave you all of those things behind you on the wall, right? And
Mm.
but of course, so many, and particularly you would encounter them and work with people. So many of the things they're given from their family circumstance are not as useful as degrees and diplomas.
100%, yeah. And if you're interested in that, John, I'm not sure if you've read The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog by Dr. Bruce Perry. Yeah. And I love that book. And so so we know, right, that, and I use this in layman's terms, with my clients, it's children need to be seen, heard, validated, unconditionally loved, and provided with physical and emotional safety. And I do this process, with my clients. I'm like, and it's at the caregiver level. So is it mom? Is it dad? Is it my adopted parents, grandparents, whoever it is that took the caregiver role? And some people have, two or three, two mums, two dads, whatever. And I say to people 0 to 5, right? How much were you seen? 0 to 5. 5 is, I felt seen all the time. And I say to people sort of, they look confused, and I go, well, kids who don't feel seen, they'll describe themselves as feeling really invisible. It's
Mm,
literally, they say, I felt invisible as a child, and we go through this process, and it really opens up for people these huge sort of gaps. And so I've got my own gaps as well. My parents split when I was very, very young. A lot of undiagnosed neurodiversity, as we see in that generation. And we know the hereditary nature of ASD, ADHD, the whole piece, so we know that that's going back through the gene lines. All of that was really uncovered, by me. That's when our family came to light about our own neurodiversity. And so there are things that were given to me that I highly valued, in terms of the best education and the motivation and the value proposition that, education is essential for critical thinking, for problem solving, So, I was very privileged in that. But, I also had some of those childhood gaps and wounds. I lived a very invalidating childhood. I was also undiagnosed ADHD, right, until my early 40s, Yet, people would say, "Where's Gina?" And the response was, "Oh, she's on the roof," or like I have the first piece of thing at work I did at school that I still have, it's called Monday's Hyperactive Child.
mm,
But the science was where it was, right, at the
yeah,
time and stuff. My parents split when I was very young, and it was a high conflict situation, for decades and decades and decades. And, as we know, these, everybody has these childhood attachment wounds. Everybody, even people who come from the most, loving families. So, for example, there are people who are like, my parents, loved me desperately. We had a lovely household. And all of a sudden you ask them questions. So who taught you about sex? Oh, no, we didn't talk about that. Oh, who told you about puberty? Oh, no, we didn't talk about that. Who told you were going to have a wet dream? Oh, school. Oh, who allowed you to express your feelings when you were sad? Oh, no, we didn't do that. So what that is invalidation, right? There's a conditional love component to that. And it's not intentional, right? We talk about omission and commission, right? So by omission, no one's intending, right, to shut everybody down. It's part of the family system, right, that comes from, the intergenerational piece. But in terms of if we are cutting children off from their emotions by not allowing it or supporting it or just having that, that is a form of abuse and neglect, right? Because emotions are energy in motion designed to move through us. And in our formative years, we're having these interrelational interactions, right? As all our neurons are building at billions of miles an hour
yeah,
right back
yeah.
then. Right. And so, but we're being cut off and blocked off from letting those experience go full circle, which is to talk about them, to validate them, and to integrate them into the brain.
So the idea, like we mentioned, in other discussions, the idea that you know young people are really in a bit of a a high impact stage, situation in life, where their mental health is very challenged, and the world is a complex, VUCA world. It's variable, it's complex, it's uncertain. And if if I take what you're saying, emotions as kind of translators of life, right? Where our interface with the actual act of living is through emotions, right? So where's going wrong? Because our parents were lack of emotions. My generation has tries we've tried to raise our kids differently. So what's messed up? What do you think has gone wrong?
So very good question. So Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory of child development, right, will tell you that children have two environments, home and school. That's it, right? And so when we talk about the you know, child and adolescent mental health crisis that's going on, right? We need to look at both of those environments, right? School and home. So what's going wrong in both of those environments? Well, what's going on in school? School is we don't have enough resources, right? We don't have enough support going on. Nobody cared that these kids went through COVID for 3 years. That's
Yeah.
a developmental gap, and we just steamrolled right over that. They went back to school and we went, oh my God, the children are out of control. Children are not born bad. It's not the children. The problem is the adults, right? And the environments that the adults are creating in which these children are being raised, right? So the schools are starved, right, of resources, systems, um, flexibility. We're looking at 25% pretty much across the board of neurodiversity. Are we really catering for neurodiverse learning in schools? Absolutely not.
On
You
my
know, no, not in my experience either. And now we're looking at this extreme inequality. You've got the public system completely starved in every single way, right? Or you're choosing God or some form of God, whatever, different God choices, or you're paying 50 grand a year, right? And so all of a sudden, right, these are the choices that parents are trying to make. And these are the environments that you're choosing for your child. You're not choosing an education, you're choosing an environment. And at the moment, the choices are really bleak. And then the second piece is then you take that into the home, right? My master's thesis is on parental stress from raising children with ADHD, right? Without going down that rabbit hole. The kind of stress that's going on at home, right? When both parents have to work full-time jobs, right? To put a home, a roof over their head, or even if you're choosing top dollar education, right? The pressure of, 50 grand a year, right? That's 100 grand a year pre-tax if you've got that kind of money, right? And so all of a sudden, no one's around to raise the kids, not because the parents don't want to be there, right? But the demands on them to cope with raising their children in society, right, means that they're unavailable for their children because they're stressed, because they're in fight and flight themselves, right? And they're trying to cope with a society that's demanding more of the resources than parents actually have available to them. And we're not stepping in. We're not stepping in to fix these environments of school and home. In fact, we're getting worse.
Do you think, so calling back onto your experience, as you described, right? There were problems in your family, but not from love, right? But from circumstance and the relational breakdown and so on. Right. But do you think, are you informed, like your journey through undiagnosed ADHD and then does that inform your understanding and connection to the current issues, or did it drive you wanting to do something about it?
No, absolutely. I think, like, I got to it. So in my early 20s I was at my lowest point in life. I had very significant depression, yeah, very significant depression. But my hyper focus, my ADHD, superpower, if you like, is I'm obsessed with information and knowledge. And like, I go down a rabbit hole as everybody does with ADHD when they're obsessed with something. But, sort of getting to the, not the truth, because what is that? But getting to the underlying factors, right? In terms of how did we end up here? How did I end up here? Or, like, this doesn't make sense to me. And so, in my early 20s, that was my first really significant, turning point because I was at rock bottom. And actually this psychiatrist treated me for free, well, for Medicare only, and chose to do that. And to this day, I still don't know why she chose to do that, but she just chose to help me, and if I I rang her up not many years ago, actually, and I said, "I just want you to know how much you saved me." And she was so surprised. She said, "What are you talking about, Gina?" And I said to her, "No, I just actually want to let you know how the impact that you had on me, and how you sent me off on a different trajectory because you just decided to help me, not for any reason, not because you were related to me." And that's when I really learnt the concept of, right, that help, not family of choice, but there actually are people out there who will choose to help you and decide to help you. And I actually ended up with this surrogate dad, and he's still my surrogate dad today. And so I took my first job out of uni. I wanted to take a year off after the HSC, and I went and worked as a dental nurse. And I got the Centrelink ad, and the dentist, is this beautiful man married with his own young children, and he became my surrogate dad, and he's still my surrogate dad. And in terms of someone who's been emotionally available and caring for me through my entire adult life, this man today who's got his own wife and his own children. I babysat his kids, beautiful person and stuff. But like, he's been a father to me my whole life. Um, and so I really stepped into that space as I grew, and just the psychiatrist, him and some other people, just they really taught me around just that like just being generous, like, coming from a place of love, like, and I call it, I'm really open to this concept of family by choice, because, I'm like, why would you keep bashing your head against a brick wall in an environment that isn't giving you what you need? Like, each individual, each child deserves, right? All of those things to be seen, to be heard, unconditional love, emotional and physical safety, and the most interesting thing about our brain's biology is we're so hardwired to crave this
Yeah,
from our
yeah.
parents, biological parents, right? We crave it. And if I do a PhD one day, I'd love that to be one of them, because it doesn't biologically make sense, right? As a child, we know that we demand that from our parents as our caregivers, because otherwise, as a species, we don't survive, right? And so that's why we know these childhood wounds form. There's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. It's my fault, because the species, the brain, turns it on itself, because it says we're not going to risk something's wrong with our caregivers, because that puts my survival as a Homo sapien animal
Yeah,
at risk,
yeah.
right? So I'm going to say there's something wrong with me. So that I get. But why then that becomes this craving to fulfill these needs by those primary caregivers once the brain is fully developed, right? Like, that makes no sense to me. It's like there's a letting go process that really should happen that doesn't. But, I have seen, full adults, when their parents, pass away, and I see this eruption of the trauma, of this longing for this relationship to, and all those things we talk about, for them to still want to experience that from their biological parents. And yeah, I really want to do a PhD on that, because it makes no
It
sense.
sounds amazing. Do you think, like, it's interesting because, like, um, a couple of things pop up from what you say. The idea that you talk about your journey, right? But is that analogous with solving those early gaps between what should have been useful and not, and wasn't, right? The reality and the dream of what we could look at archetype childhood, right? Like connecting with archetypal parents who give us perfect nurturing and perfect safety and all of the rest of the elements that you talk about. So how you solve that, usually uh, children don't have the resources themselves. So you connected that family of choice you had. That's luck, or was that you, or what?
Yeah, I think I wasn't conscious at the time, but I definitely was looking for answers, you know. I was definitely looking for answers, but I think it was more primal back then, in terms of, like, when we talk about grit, in the work of Angela Duckworth, like definitely, like, was I born a fighter? Was I born like rise from the ashes? Was I born like get up and fight? Like, yeah, there is definitely a genetic component or genetic trait in me, in terms of just to keep going and not give up. Um, but so I think that was probably more what was driving it at the time, but definitely, as I entered therapy, and I've done over, God, how old am I now? 25 years of therapy, and I continue to use therapy, right, as I need it. Or want to go that or want to go and do some work on myself. Um, then I think as I started to understand some of the layers, and I really started to understand that there was this onion that needed to be unpeeled and rebuilt. I think I started to really understand that through my early therapeutic experiences. And I think it just kind of took off from there.
Which is, fortuitous because, that growth, that journey sort of ended up resolving some of those challenges and allowing you to heal, right? Which we can talk about as we go. But it goes back to the thought, right, when you shared the idea of the experience of childhood, Erickson and Perry and so on, creating the states of development that are so crucial. But so few children end up in that perfect storm, right? So I wonder if the idea of it takes a village to raise a child was much more about it takes a village to get a normal childhood, right? And I wonder if we've not lost those institutions and understanding, and as a result, we're seeing an outbreak of non-normal outcomes getting to sort of, early adulthood.
I think you're absolutely exactly right. I think that the environment that children are raised in today is absolutely lacking what we know is required for human brain development. Because absolutely it's children, right? And I don't want to talk about it like not as human beings because it is, we talk about what is the concept of the mind, but ultimately what we're talking about in those early years is we need environments that mean the organization of the brain in the early years, the neural pathways and connections that get set up in the brain and the nervous system, right? We're talking about there is a certain there are certain structures and certain neural pathways that need to be set up early in life, in a healthy way. That means that gives people a much better chance of being a healthy, functioning adult. I mean, that's ultimately what we're talking about. And yeah, absolutely, 100% does it take a village to raise a child?
'Cause
Absolutely.
it's very hard with adults, given the generational impacts, the misunderstandings that were around raising children in the past, right? It's hard for one parent to have all of the capacity to offer all of the things you're talking about, being seen, heard,
Exactly right.
validated, emotional and physical safety. So that village concept offering a much multiple individuals to do it, like your experience, and to be truthful, mine, right? That rings a bell with me because it was other men that gave me my chance, other institutions that gave me my chance rather than my home. So it rings true. So that's interesting. So you're there as an adult, right? You're growing into many years of therapy, which is a very you know in, an element a lot of people who are now giving back in that area, in that space, and handing back to community often talk about their own therapeutic journey, right? Yeah, how important do you feel, right, your experiences of your childhood ACEs, adverse childhood experiences for the audience, and the process of how that impacts your adulthood, obviously, because you bring your circumstance into your relationships and your engagement. So, what do you think was drive? What motivation and what capital did that give you for taking on your career, to taking a direction in life?
In terms like, but back in the day? Okay, so I love this story because this is my coping mechanism, crash and burn, re-identity story. So, um, and there's the ADHD piece in there, right? So we all form these adaptive, behaviors. So for me, it was external validation, right? I was captain of this, I won that, I got this sport, I did that, and I got really good at achieving. I was amazing at achieving, right? Because what I say to people, and, you won't find this in the literature, but so many clinical hours of it, right? So what we do is we all form these adaptive response mechanisms, right? And they vary for different people. But for me, it was validation through achievement.
Yeah.
But when you have ADHD, it's like sticking a hyperdrive on the end of that. So not only am I good at achievement, but you put my neurodiversity on the end of that, and wow, watch me go. And so people have always said to me all my life, "Oh, you can do anything that you want to do." And I go, "Oh, well, if you really knew the reason why I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
do
yeah,
that."
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the want bit that's dodgy, not the can do bit, right? Yeah,
Exactly. So, I went off and did a lot of achieving in my career, and, I had an amazing career as a marketing director and in sports marketing and agencies and Commonwealth Games and all, Qantas, HSBC, IMG, all the big guns, and, had an amazing career, right? But, like, every time I landed on an achievement, it was just like, "Next, next, next, next," and also there was, I was very aware of the dysregulation that would happen to me at times, in terms of just there were times that, you know, in business, and I see it now in corporations, everybody's projecting and throwing their childhood, wounds at everybody. And,
yeah,
I don't mean it in a funny way, but it's reflective that, that makes me laugh and smile about it because that's what I was doing as well, right? You need to recognize me, the power struggles, the I deserve the promotion, the victim behavior that goes with that, the people pleasing. We talk about people sucking up, people with their own agendas, etc. And it's just everybody playing out their childhood wounds, whether it's manipulation, whether it's people pleasing, whether it's narcissism, power struggles, victimhood. You know what I mean? This is what we see in any organization, right? And so it got to the point where I burnt out really.
mm,
And also I had kids. And so when I had kids, I lost all that power.
yeah,
I was making amazing money, I had status, titles, the whole bit. And then I became a mum, which I really wanted to do. And I didn't realize, but all of that got stripped from me in an instant.
yeah,
And also when I went back to work and I went back to, the crazy, system that I used, I also got burnout and I ended up with HPA axis dysfunction, really badly. But so then I had a complete identity crisis. And then, that was from, there's a few different turning points in there, but that was a particular turning point again for me where I was like, again, because I've been in and out of therapy all the time. I was always taking myself. So I was always sort of learning bits and pieces. But that whole crash that I had, and I love Finding Joe, which, you can watch free. And if I love that. And I give that to all my clients. I just love it says so much and you can just watch it for an hour, right? And you're like, okay, I get that. So that was kind of, some of my Finding Joe, hero's journey moments. Um, and that was where the opportunity in my journey to completely unpeel the onion, like literally down to the core and rebuild it. That was that piece for me. And that's the journey that I went on. But like absolutely, it totally informs, the work that I do today and why I work in the area I do in my practice, because I fully understand the science on how influential those 0 to 5 years are. As children, we're powerless, right? And I also understand, I read a lot of stuff on environment. One of my other favorite books, I forget it right now because I'm in perimenopause. Um, but environment, environment, environment. So they became my two real sort of obsessions and my own and part of the therapy in my own journey, right? Because it's when we put those two pieces together that we're really able to understand, oh, it wasn't my fault. It's not me.
which is interesting. Can I ask a confronting question about therapy, right? Because
Yeah,
you are a
go.
psychotherapist, right?
I am.
Yeah, and, that whole describing your journey, right, really sort of sings to me the idea of, what is normal where, there's, exceptionalism is like this we measure achievement by all of these milestones of material achievement and recognition and status and power and money, of course. But if that's breathing, if that's normal breath, right, then it actually doesn't, you still have to take the next one, right? Which means another achievement is necessary just to keep your normality, to keep yourself alive. And of course, all those years of therapy, why did that not change? It wasn't until you had, like we talk about the hero's journey, which is Finding Joe, which is about Joseph Campbell, of course, the hero's journey, right? And that changes when you have basically death and
Mm.
rebirth, the idea of being completely destroyed and then be remade with new wisdom. Why is that necessary? You had all this therapy. Why couldn't the therapist help you fix things, or you had to fall completely in a heap?
Yeah, because I think there's an interesting journey of therapy itself, right? And I don't want to speak negatively about different therapies, but so what trauma therapy teaches us, right? And let's also understand that trauma therapy, as far as and neuroscience, right? In the last 10 years, 20 years, right? Groundbreaking, at the research level, in the way that we understand, I mean, it's not that long ago that we thought the brain was a machine, right? As opposed to, of what we know now is the brain is completely plastic, right? Um, and capable of rewiring. So when we talk, so there's different types of therapy. And if we think of a human being as a tree, we've got roots, we've got the trunk, we've got the branches and the leaves. So as a psychotherapist, I deal with the roots so that the trunk, the trees, and the branches grow healthily, right? So that's what I do. In psychotherapy, right? People just start to feel differently and respond differently where they're in the outside world. I don't give people, this strategy or that strategy. Yeah, sure, we talk about a bit of that, some coping stuff. But ultimately, in the therapy I do, my clients will come back in and they will just tell me, oh, I didn't react like that. Oh, I had this situation. Oh, I actually saw myself in someone else's behavior and recognized that that used to be me, right?
Mm.
So in psychotherapy, it's like, how do we change the inside world? Because then the outside world will simply change as a result of us changing on the inside, you know? So I didn't have a lot of psychotherapy until later on. I
Oh, well, okay. So
was in therapy, but I wasn't
here
in
we
psychotherapy.
right. And I guess it goes down my personal, this is my opinion. Sorry, all my friends who are therapists. Um, all of it's good, but some of it's more good, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's
yeah,
right.
and it's interesting because no one heals anyone else. They only heal themselves. So, finding what you need to do to to heal through whatever resources, other people and experiences and so on. But it's interesting, right? Rock bottom. Life continually provides, scenarios for us to exist in, and they are either good or bad depending on our proximity to, the pain and suffering of one or the other, right? So life will continually struggle. Why do we need to go back to rock bottom? Is it a matter of resetting things, or is it an overwhelming, something that overwhelms previous programming? And why do we need to continually end up in a suffering state to change?
It's so interesting that, isn't it? That's another PhD somewhere. Um, but it's so interesting that, and it's so there are a few things, right, about the neurobiology and the development of the human brain, that we don't know or don't have answers for, and they are actually things I've come to accept. So, and that's exactly what, and to be honest, that's one of those things, and because the answer, I'm looking for answers inside myself. I have to say, I'm not looking for answers, from third parties or other explanations. To be honest, and that's obviously my personal choice. But the way I look at it is, it's like we weren't in control of what happened to us, right? And when we can understand that we're not responsible for us, right? Then that is what gives us the opportunity to then um, take accountability for it. And I'm very open with my clients about that, in terms of, what happened to you was wrong. You deserved better. Every single child, deserves XYZ, right? But not many of us get it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but you are responsible for deciding how you respond to what happened to you. And in that lies the choice. Now, this is the bit that I get frustrated with society, is everyone should have that choice, right? Because not everybody chooses it. People say, no, I just want to stay ignorant, potter along, whatever. I'm good with that. I'm like, great, it's your choice. The bit I get frustrated with the society and the mental health system, and just all the constructs is that if a child is not born into, an advantageous environment, right,
Yeah.
then at least give them the choice to heal. Support them to be able to make that choice, or have that choice available to them. Because there's plenty of people who have the means to heal and choose not to, right?
Yeah.
Lots of people make that choice. But a child who's born into disadvantageous, circumstances and is still never given that choice to heal, right? That's the bit that I have to say really grinds me. I was given the choice, and part of the reason I was given the choice is because I was so highly educated for all the things that were going on, in my childhood. Both my parents valued education. It was the one thing they agreed upon, right? So in terms of critical thinking, right, problem solving, questioning what you're told, questioning truth, right? I was given the opportunity to heal because, I was given the choice to walk the path of healing, and that's the bit that I get a bit grated with. I think, I don't know why, I mean, society has a lot to answer for in terms of the attachment wounds that children end up with. But, let's give them a chance. Let's give them a chance and a choice to heal if that's what they want to do.
Yeah, I really like that idea that it's, we can throw the resources out into the field. We don't need to lock them up in special institutions or put gatekeepers on the door to those resources.
They're not healing in there.
No, exactly. Yeah. A great thought. Of course, once you take, I love that idea of you being, having the gift of some extra resources to heal. But of course, the world and life continues to throw, opportunities to get to the next level at you, right? So plenty of those in there, right? The idea that, oh gosh, just when I'm sort of, getting older, thinking, like I'm putting to bed some of the challenges, right? You get new ones, and of course some of those involve tragedy, and some of those involve pain and suffering, and a call to arms. Whether I go on living or not, right? Um, and without sort of going into too much detail, I
Mm,
know you've had a fair dose of your own, right?
mm.
How do you step up into those, right? If there are a need to gather resources to walk the path of healing, you find a way to continually just step up to that.
Yeah. Like absolutely. Like, one thing I love Alicia Keys and I love her music. And, but she didn't, she wrote this book and I haven't actually read the book, but there's this quote that from it. And she said, once I understood, right, the groundlessness, right, of life. She goes, once I understood that uncertainty was its true nature, that the ground was never still underneath me, to begin with,
Mm,
then this incredible power came to her, from a realization and acceptance of that. And I think there's something really powerful in that we all need to think about because we struggle so much with uncertainty. But yeah, when I lost, a sibling to suicide, yeah, it took me, a long time, or again, I was back in places within myself that I didn't think life would ask me to go to again.
mm,
Sorry, I have to laugh because, I really didn't think that life was gonna ask me to do that, and it did, and I think I've stopped saying, sort of, the last profound lesson I've got to learn, because I've really come to accept that there is this constant momentum, this constant momentum where I am just growing and being and integrating and reintegrating. And what I've learned is at the core of that is that my greatest gift to myself, my own life, and what I can give to others is to be so innately connected to my true self that that is, and that I build a life that allows me to be that. There's two components to that. The first component is that I truly believe that, if I can be as deeply connected to myself as I need to be, which means we go down these rabbit holes time and time again, and it's dark and it's alone. And, the thing that I really, encourage all people to do, and I say this to my clients is like, my job is to be in the cave with you, to
Mm.
hold your hand, to walk alongside you and hold the torch so that you're not alone, because none of this healing work gets done alone. We are a relational social species. It is in relation with others. I'm not sure if you've read interpersonal neurobiology, but there's this beautiful concept of the brain in that, in terms of we have our internal nervous system being the brain and our entire nervous system. And then we have the nervous system of the other person. And then we have our neuroneurons and
Mm.
the way our nervous systems interrelate to each other, and within that becomes this concept of the mind. And so I don't believe that anything should be done on our own. As we talk about, there is trauma, and then there is being the trauma of being alone with your trauma, and it's that interrelational piece. um so that piece it's that personal meaning around, to be as deeply connected to myself, as I can. And that means, you know, that means fear facing. I'm a really big fan of facing fear. I think it is one of the greatest things that every human being needs to do. You cannot be fully connected to yourself if you cannot stand with your fears, you know. And when people talk about fear facing and pushing through it and all that stuff, it's sitting with it.
Mm.
It's sitting with it. I am afraid of, my greatest fear is, you know, sitting with how uncomfortable that feels. How do we befriend fear? How do we hold its hand? Right? Because most people do not realize how much fear is driving their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, you know.
Oh, just on that idea. So in that fear, right? That holding and accepting that fear, that sent a beautiful. You gave us a beautiful sense of stasis there, of like that homeostasis. I'm there in that moment, right? But moving forward, is that purpose, right?
Yeah,
It's our
for
purpose
me
that
it is.
moves us from that acceptance of fear, that moment of fear beyond there? Is that
I
purpose?
I believe so. That's my belief. Yeah, because when I'm in that centered, when I'm living in that centered place of s- homeostasis, if you want, that is in deep connection with what feels like my authentic self, soul, whatever it is, right? Then I am living with purpose because this is who I'm meant to be.
I'm sorry, I interrupted the second
No, and
element of.
that's very peaceful. I find that very, it's brought, it's the most peaceful I've ever felt, in finding that connection. So I think it is. Yeah, I think it is. Like I'm not sure. I don't purpose. Yes, for me, it's personal meaning. And there's a neurodiversity aspect to this as well. I talk about this a lot with my ADHDs and and clients. As ADHDs, there's so many things we've got to do that we don't want to do. We're all about shiny things and
Mm.
hyper focus and the thrill and whatever it is, right? We bring amazing gifts of creativity and science and entertainment and solving to the world. Things that move human beings on the inside, right? That is the special gift of neurodiversity. But from an ADHD perspective, we see this, right? There has to be this connection with personal meaning for motivation to occur. There's all these motivational models. What is made
Mm.
up of motion, self-talk, change talk, blah, 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 blah. And it's all good. I love motivational interviewing. But from a neurodiversity ADHD perspective, that personal meaning, right? If that's not there, motivation isn't there, you know? Yeah, I'm happy to be proved wrong. I'm open, if anyone wants to come and prove me wrong on that. Because you don't so much read about that in the literature, sort of indirectly
Yeah.
it's there, but this personal meaning. So I think purpose, yes, but for me it's personal meaning. The second piece is within a world, right, that there is so much you should, you have to, you must, right?
Mm.
How do we maintain a life of congruency with ourselves and who we are, when there are so many rules, stories about what we have to do, not do, etc. And I see this is the major problem with children in education. You know, it's like there's all these things we're measuring, and it's like, well, why don't you measure stress levels? Why on the report cards isn't there, this is how much I love my teacher or I don't? This is how safe I feel in my classroom. This is how much I love coming to school. This is how regulated I feel at school. This is how many friends I really feel like I've got. Actually, this is how these are the people that I'm really struggling with, right? And this comes back to fear. The reason we don't want to measure and ask these things is because as adults, we're really scared to ask them or
Yeah.
know the adults, because what it does is it puts a mirror in our face. I don't get on with those other teacher
Mm.
peers. This happened to me at school. I was really bad friend making. I didn't belong at school. That's why we don't ask these things, you know?
It's a lifetime of practice of avoidance, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Avoidance in all its many forms, dissociation, that's the whole bit, right? And so, we praise these children on these report cards, and it's like we value what we measure. So therefore we measure what we value. And it goes back and says, well, if that's what you're valuing, that's not being seen, being heard, being validated, being unconditionally loved, and providing emotional and physical safety. So you're not measuring any of those.
Yeah. I find it fascinating that when we diagnose ADHD in adults, we ask them to go right back to their report cards and say, and look for certain statements and patterns of being problematic, right? Oh, were you did you get the did you get the criticism on your report card? Oh, right, now we can use that as validating your ADHD diagnosis, right? That's a
And as long as it's under the age of 12, we can give you access to the stimulants. But if we can't validate you below the age of 12, you can only have access to the non-stimulants.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
It's crazy that, the school system, treated them so badly, we use that as a diagnostic tool, right? So,
But everyone seems to be okay.
like, I'm sitting there going, like, I can tell you, my report card for my diagnosis, my report cards all contain the same thing, right? Which is, it's amazing, right? When you talk about personal meaning and then, this sense of essentially what am I hearing that you're talking about all of the external cues of who we are, right? Our identity as described by others, right? Is what we rely on and yet the real strength comes from when we finally unlock our own identity and how we see and accept our own traits and
Exactly.
aspects.
That's right. And that's the right of every single person. You get to choose who you are, John. I get to choose who I am. Every person should have the choice. You decide who you are and who you want to be in this life, right? That's the right. That's what actually all the human rights things say. If you look at the United Nations rights on the child, it's
Yeah.
exactly what it says.
Yeah, yeah, wow. So why does the medical model insist on telling people what's wrong with them and who they are?
Well, that's just what the medical model is. The medical model isn't really useful when we talk about, the outcomes or the symptoms that are a result from environmental impact, if you like.
Yeah,
I don't know if you've ever read Jahan Hari's book in terms called Lost Connections, the real reasons behind depression. Yes, we know there is genetic based depression. Absolutely. We do know that, right? It's in the science. But, you know, there's way too many people depressed versus, what we know are the numbers on genetic-based depression, right? Or genetic-based anxiety. So it's like, well, we need to go looking for some other reasons then, and I love his book because that's what his book talks about, and then we're in the realms of positive psychology, which I love. Martin Seligman,
Yeah.
his PERMA model, beautiful, right? Positive emotion, personal meaning, in relation with others, or like his PERMA model's beautiful.
I love the idea that they talk about a life well lived, right? Which is a connection. So are we extrapolating that depression, anxiety is really illustrating in many ways a disconnection with things that are actually resourceful for people?
Yeah, well, that's what Jahan Hari will tell you. He will say to you that depression is disconnection. That's what he'll tell you.
And people like modern neuroscience is pointing us in that direction. You can see it. Dr. Mark Williams, the Australian neuroscientist, talks about the connection phenomena. What is then how do we rebuild? How do we reinforce? How do we create say virtual villages to support the healing journey? How do we improve the capacity of our people?
100%. Like, and this is the really hard bit, right? And this is the bit sort of that is part two, right? So part two is, okay, so how do I build a life, within the social constructed environment that demands I exist within it without running off to the jungle and hanging out there by yourself, right? How do I build a life that allows me to live in alignment with who I am, deeply connected to myself? How do I do that, right? I don't think there's any simple or easy answer for that because from a neurodiversity perspective for me as well, right? Like, what we're saying 2 to 3% of adults, but all the leading scientists will tell you the majority of, adults are yet to be diagnosed with ADHD is simply a function of where the science is at. 7 to 8% of children. So in terms of like, is there a small percentage of the world whose brain works like mine? Yeah, I'm a minority, right? But, and we know, from an ADHD perspective, there's very specific environments where ADHD brains will absolutely shine and do their best. And there are environments where ADHD brains will just crumble and break, right? It's that, it's either this is a great environment or these environments don't work for your brain. But it's the same for all of us, right? Because the lack of connection is something, doesn't matter what kind of brain you have, right? We're social animals, and that it underpins, that sense of, it's like the loneliness epidemic that everyone's talking about. It's disconnection, right? And so you know, I think there's choices to be made, right, for each person. But can we expect children to do that? No way. I mean, these are choices I made midlife, you know? Is it okay I made them midlife? It is for me because, this is the journey I walk. You can't change the past. It's gone. The future is what's available to you. But again, do we give people the opportunity to make a choice to build an environment that's right for them, their needs, and their brain? Again, no, we take that choice away from people, you know? Like, again, I live a privilege that allows me to do that, There is my capacity, the education I got, the drive I have, my ADHD, ability to earn money, create things, like all of those things I've utilized. But it's also, there's a lot of privilege that I've had that has allowed me to walk that path and walk that journey, right? And also, I became really open to people helping me and helping others. I'm a big fan of this give out, get back type thing, and I give a lot out. And as a result of that, I get a lot back, people will help me if I ask them because they're like, she helped me. So I don't have the answer on that, but I do, through everything I've read, from the deepest evidence and the science, through to, through to, Jahan Hari, through to Bruce Perry, go back to Bowlby, Freud, the early psychotherapies, the ecological theories of child development, interpersonal neurobiology, they're all saying the same thing. right? Yes, we have more advancement. Yes, we understand neurologically, more. Yes, we can look at the wiring more, but it's like meditation, all of a sudden, you know, the Western world's going, meditation works.
Yeah,
It's like only because only because the medical model can prove it based on random controlled trials, because that's the only measurement you have for evidence. But people have been meditating for 3,000 years,
I think
you
the
know?
the gurus in India have other evidence that they're quite comfortable accepting, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so Noam Chomsky, right, who this incredible modern day
Thinker,
philosopher
philosopher.
and yeah, all of it, economist, the whole bit. I love it. He has this saying, and I can't remember the exact words, so I might get it wrong, but he said, "No one's going to come and pour the truth in a cup for you. You have to go find it for yourself." Right. But the thing is that you have to know in the beginning that there is potentially a different truth out there to even ask that question.
Yeah, yeah,
And this is again the bit where we rob people, right? Give them the education, like give them what they need so that they can actually know or ask the question, maybe there's another truth out there. Because if we believe we're stuck, if we believe we can't change, if we believe there's no hope, if we don't even have a flicker of hope that there might be an alternate reality, an alternate lens, an alternate reason, right? Then we're in a complete state of hopelessness and disempowerment.
yeah.
And no human being or society should rob that from another human being, right? That's just a moral violation in my view on every sense of the word, right? Don't take away the opportunity for another human being to find their truth. You don't have the right to do that.
That's a brilliant thought, and I think yeah, we could probably go on for multiple podcasts, right? Because there's so many. I'm left with more questions than I started with. So that's I very much appreciate your turning the juices on. Of course, there's rabbit holes I need to go down, but I'm interested in bringing it back to your personal journey as well. So I love the acknowledging that challenges and grief and tragedy and suffering, all of those things are those moments of genuine human a catalyst for transition. How did you moving through the journey and taking that personal moment to the calmness of that personal meaning? How did you gain meaning out of those very difficult? What was the key for you?
Um, interestingly, again, back to, so I say this, so I used to be fueled by very, very powerful energy, but that energy was dark. And now I'm powered by an even more powerful energy, and that energy is self-love and love for others. And I had a client actually, and interestingly, he made the same energy shift in the journey that he walked along together. And one of the things that he said to me, "Oh, it doesn't feel as strong as the dark energy." And I said, "No, it's actually way more powerful. It's just that you haven't known it before. It's new for you, and you're only starting to understand it, and you need to walk that path too." So So in every pain, right? So I'm not, I never say to people, you want to wipe your past, right? Every single piece of pain you have in healed form becomes one of your greatest powers in healed form, right? So our dark energy, our wounds, whatever you want to call it, right? In unhealed, unaware, form is very damaging to ourself, our relations, our life, the people around us, right? But I say to people, you don't want to wipe all that away because in that is also your potential.
Mm.
But becomes your potential when it's in healed form. And so that's the journey, right? And so I truly believe that. And so in all the, in all the tragedy that I've had in my life, or the few tragedies, that I live with, that don't get any easier to live with at all any day. But I do the work so that what it is that it's the love, it's in healed form, because then it becomes my greatest power to walk my path of personal meaning.
Wow. That's a wonderful thought to take away, and so much richness, so much of interest, Gina, that you've opened up just the beginning of, right? So I look forward to having further conversations maybe down the track where we explore new transitions and new ideas. But today has been
Absolutely.
amazing. Thank you so much for sharing some really cool ideas, and of course, thank you for the work you do, turning your personal meaning into support and care for others. Love it.
Thank you so much for having me, John. It's always a pleasure. No
It's
doubt we
been
will talk
wonderful.
more.
You look forward to it. All the best. Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Kintsugi Heroes. Thank you to Colin Lilly for permission to use Broken as our theme music for this series. If you enjoyed this conversation, share the podcast with a friend and let us know by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support Kintsugi Heroes and the stories we share, head to kintsugiheroes.com.au and follow the instructions to make a tax-deductible donation. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.